Andrealphus, the bird owner. The voice was not right. It sounded like a noble and beautiful woman's voice, but it was being spoken by the opening beaks of the various beautiful birds that made up the giant aviary's residence. It scared Nilufer. She was just being kept inside another giant cage, and she felt sleepy and ill, that incense still wafting in the air to make her weak as she sat on a cushion upon the sandy floor, as a large wicker chair supported the impressive vision of a human female. A form Andrealphus felt suited the vision her daughter must have of her. She was wearing a huge, rich, scarlet dress that smothered the ground around to hide the scaled, three-toed cassowary-style feet she could never conceal when she took a human form in hell. Her skin was of a soft golden shade, her hair dark chestnut, and in great coiling waves that made Nilufer think only of the mane of a lion, and it worried her. The eyes of her mother were yellow and like a crow's, peering and flexing at her with both intelligence and something undefinable that was also uncomfortable. So a quote from Fragrance of Paradise. One of those oddball demons that is described only in demonology texts and does not have a name where you could try and break it down into something that has much meaning, but looks like a mash of Andrea and Malthus. Andrealphus is one of the myriad of names out there for demons that sometimes perform the same function and sometimes are just names. It's perhaps one of those things you find in demonology. If they're not a true fallen angel with biblical mention or notes in the apocryphal pieces, it generally means it came a lot later when people were naming demons. Andrealphus is mentioned not only in the Gothia, also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon, Scott's discovery of witches, and Verus's Pseudomonarchia Daemonum. Apologies for bad pronunciations. Lately the demon's been popping up in a couple of games. I don't play these games, just notice the name. And there's more art related to it, but the information available is quite simple really, as with a lot of these demons, so I'll read from the Dictionary of Demons by Michel Bellinger for you to explain it. A great marquis in the hosts of hell, Andrealphus is said to take the form of a peacock. He can transform men into birds. In addition to this, he can teach geometry, astronomy, and any discipline dealing with measurements. In Verus and Scott, he is listed as governing 30 legions, and in the Gothia, he is constrained by the angel Demabia. Information-wise, that's about the extent of it all, and quite normal with these later demons. So why do I use Andrealphus? Well, when it comes to obscure demons, when I go looking for names to feature in my stories, I like to use ones that have very little written about them, but just enough to work with. In the case of Andrealphus, although I had been hoping for a fallen angel to use for this purpose, I decided a marquis would be suitable to place in that position, especially considering the trouble they get into. Why is Andrealphus the mother of the Peri? Well, I was always of the thought that Milton's statement in Paradise Lost about demons choosing their genders at will was probably quite close. It's why my angels in the Beyond the Veil universe tend to be agender or sexless, and gave a secondary element to the fall, and why the actions of the Watchers would also be so brutally condemned. Andrealphus's interesting characteristic with birds just seemed rather appropriate, as I had a servant of hers in the form of a sparrow bully Nilufer once she got out. So here's a little about my version of Andrealphus, whom I shall refer to as female for the most part. Name Andrealphus. Position Marquis of Hell. Story featured in Fragrance of Paradise. Role main antagonist. Gender fluid but first chose female and often prefers to stay female. Description. Varies with all demons, most commonly known to take the form of a male peacock when abroad, and when summoned most often appears in male form to ensure mortals listen to them. Their looks and characteristics often change per country, but they have the long, slightly hooked nose of a vicious bird. They always have the legs of a cassowary with vicious claws no matter their form, and their voice is never spoken by them, only by the birds around them. When in hell, Andrealphus enjoys the female status and attention from the male demons, and this she loves to do when dragging victims down to hell to turn their souls into birds and their hides into the furniture. Realm Hell. Abilities changing beings into birds, teaching humans measurements, geometry, and astronomy, and once they painted the feathers upon the birds of Eden that would later exist in the world and taught the female birds to value the feathers above ability. Master Lucifer. Personality conniving, possessive, and cruel. Andrealphus never likes to be summoned and always misses something out of the contracts they make to ensure the human that makes a deal with them somehow breaks it. They don't love, prize, or adore anything but the birds they are no longer able to see and marvel at their work, so they turn humans into them to prize them and cage them. They like nothing more than to open the cage to make them think they can fly, only to prick them with until they fear the opening of the cage door. An attention seeker, Andrealphus desires compliments, and though bitter their wings stolen, they pluck a feather from each bird in their aviary every 100 years to remake a pair of wings they can wrap themselves in and use to fly briefly in their peacock form. Relations. Andrealphus was a later angel, one of the last lots born with the duties to suit the animals that the Almighty was making, so they have no siblings in fault. Cockybell. A companion in heaven, Andrealphus used to ask Cockybell for the paints for their birds and always muse on their colours and encourage Cockybell to praise them. They were friends in heaven, and when Andrealphus became female, it was Cockybell she coupled with, but his decision to forsake her and stay on the neutral side in the war angered and excited Andrealphus. When Cockybell was a watcher and sent to purgatory, Andrealphus came in the female guise, pitied him, and tried desperately to possess them again, but Cockybell was too obsessed with their wings being gone to listen, and Andrealphus offered him the wings of any bird to even turn him into a bird, until finally she came up with a way to trick Cockybell into getting his wings back, but belonging to her aviary. Sariel. He was always in awe of her work with the birds, and Andrealphus knew it and was often eager to show off, loving his desperate eyes, and then, when becoming female, approaching him. She teased and insisted he should try, and stole a kiss, but Sariel got scared and pulled back. She couldn't give a care to him after that, and has little interest save in knowing that Sariel fears the kiss got her pregnant. Nilufer, the daughter of Andrealphus and one of the angels. When Andrealphus's wings were removed and she was cast out, the ground was coming closer as her belly swelled, and before she fell into hell, she birthed the Peri Nilufer, who opened her wings and became fully grown, landing on the earth just as her mother fell to hell. Andrealphus had no interest in this child whatsoever until she found a way to make the little fairy's wings useful for her. History. Covered a bit already, so I'll try and keep it brief. A later angel born of the thought to colour the birds of the world, Andrealphus bore another name in heaven that is long lost. In heaven they painted the colours of the feathers of the birds that lived in Eden, waiting for the day the Almighty would let their form develop on the earth. They watched many come and go, but always lived in Eden, and then the matter of the humans arrived, and Andrealphus was eager for a species to praise their work as much as the angels did. But when Lucifer came and told them that man would possess all they had made and give glory only to God, and that they could create themselves if they dared to display what these humans had, gender, Andrealphus was intrigued. They followed many others in changing to a female form, but where the others fornicated with one another, Andrealphus sought her two main admirers in heaven. She stole a kiss from Sariel, who fled from her, but Cockybell she pulled in for more, and as he stroked her wings and insisted her beauty was greater than the bird she painted, Andrealphus became obsessed with keeping Cockybell so she would always be praised, but he refused to enter the war. Andrealphus fought, but the angel Demobeia threw her down with his lance, pinning her to the ground, and aided in the removal of her feathers as she was dragged to the edge when Lucifer lost and then cast out. Whilst falling, her stomach swelled with a life within, and some beings beside her birthing just as they fell, and their children were like ugly angels as they fluttered on the edge of heaven. But she kept falling, and her belly kept growing until she could see the earth below, opening up into fire, and before the flames touched her, she birthed a daughter that floated down to the earth whilst she fell down into the pit, her wing stumps burning to nothing, and her body being broken as she tumbled off rocks to land in a heap with the others. For many years, Andrealphus wanted nothing but to wait for humans to call her name and ask for her help with what she knew. But when the humans that summoned never spoke of her birds and did not respect a female form to give them good information, she took male forms to see them and began to trick them into never being able to get what they want, but hastening their death in small print before catching their souls and turning them into birds she could keep and torment. When Cockybell was in a part of purgatory she could reach, she went to see him and tried to seduce him to stay with her, to be her favourite bird and praise her forever. But he was despondent. Nothing Andrealphus could do with flesh or feather could impress the watcher that mourned his lovely wings and the mocking of his intelligence. Andrealphus kept insisting she could get his wings back if he would do as she said, but to do so would break God's rules and also require something sneaky, and so, the next human she got to deal with, she gave them a task to catch the one being that could give wings to Cockybell, a Peri, and in doing so, she hoped to give Cockybell wings, but made a contract with him to ensure he would be her possession, even if he had not quite realised it. Final comments. Links between Cockybell and Andrealphus are covered in Fragrance of Paradise, and if you sponsor on Patreon for just $1, you can read it all. Andrealphus is a case of the various points of pride that seem to be a common trend amongst the fallen beings, and made an interesting villain with a very prominent cruel streak, but also a few tiny aspects that some can understand. It was actually really fun to write her brief bits in Fragrance of Paradise, which is quite cruel. Anyway, thank you for listening, and of course, thanks to all my patrons.